everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of Wrestling with the Future. I'm your host, Psychic Comedian Angelo. Tonight, a very, very special show. Chris Benoit Revisited. Before I even go any further, I am instructed by legal counsel to read the following. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the panelists and participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions, policy, or position of Wrestling with the Future Network, its network affiliates, or Wrestling with the Future TV, including Facebook, YouTube, Dailymotion, Twitter, or any other form of viable or alternative social media platforming by which we broadcast. And the opinion content provided by our panelists or guests are their own opinion only and are not intended to malign any person, persons, group of people, corporation, or in any way to bring shame upon Chris Benoit and or his family and friends, including any and all members living or deceased. Having said that, welcome to the show. We are going to take a deep dive into the murder suicide hit of Chris Benoit. And joining me tonight is an all-star panel. From all the way Nashville, Tennessee. All the way in Nashville, a Jersey boy. My dear friend, the guy who was promoted for some 24 years. Just call him Ricky O. Ricky Atozu, how you doing, brother?
Good, man. Thank you for having me on. I look forward to this show for a couple weeks, and let's knock this out of the park.
I should tell everybody that Ricky is going to be joining me more regularly as my acting co-host. We're going to try each other on like a glove and see if we fit. And I think you're going to find that we actually have quite a bit in common. Just above Ricky O is the man called Armageddon. Mike Murphy is an independent worker of some 25 years. He is in semi-retirement. We always say that because no wrestler ever really retires. So
no, we just get
the show.
We just get fat and we play golf.
There you go. Joining Mike Murphy is Mike Kelleher, the guy called Mad Mike. Mad Mike Kelleher. He is our resident in-house television star, quite frankly. He is what? Don't hang your head in shame. Be proud of it, sir. He is a one part and parcel of Legacy List with Matt Paxton. You, of course, know Matt Paxton as the host of Hoarders, or one of the people that host Hoarders. And Mike is his stuff. Are we still saying stuff guy, or are we calling it merchandise expert?
Stuff expert. Let's merge the two.
Stuff expert. And joining us on the phone is a veteran of some 35, almost 40 years in pro wrestling. The man everybody just calls the doctor, the good doctor. Doc Diamond is with us. Doc, are you there? Doc, are you there?
I've fallen off.
Okay, we'll try to get Doc back. We will try to get Doc back. Well, in the meantime, we are live. We're on the air, and so we just got to continue, fellas. Tonight, I have to tell everybody, in the interest of full disclosure, I almost didn't do the show tonight. I've been threatened with violence, physical violence.
Oh, my God.
Blackmailed. I have been, and this is all shoot too, by the way. I have been told, don't come out of your house. I can't anyway. I'm in quarantine, so fuck you. Quite frankly. And the guy who told me don't come out of my house, he knows who he is. And I know who he is because I'm going to mention his name at the end of the show. So, again, double fuck you. I've already been told don't do the show. You're going to get a lot of heat for it. Well, guess what? Bring it. Bring it. We're going to do the show. If it's good enough for Vice, it's good enough for Wrestling with the Future. So let me start with my dear friend Ricky O. Ricky, brother, we've been around this a long time. You and I have both promoted for 24, 25 plus years. We've both worked with Benoit Guerrero You knew Chris a little better than I did. What kind of guy was he?
I can go off of sharing a locker room with him a handful of times. I can also speak about the time I worked for Vince quite a few times, doing SmackDown and Raws as an extra. And one of the things that we learned real quick was you never really felt comfortable around the man. It was basically his job to torture all the new guys in the locker room. When you're an extra in the WWE, you do not change in the locker room. And that's obvious. I mean, they set up a little tent or they set up a closet somewhere for you. You go in and change. And it was Chris's job to torture you. So when you went to do your segment, you'd come back and your clothes were cut in half. Your shoes were stolen. There was piss in your bag. This was all stuff that he orchestrated out of fun. And ribbing is fine. Nobody really said anything. But there's a couple wrestlers who did come forward over the years. And if you go back and look the way I researched this over the last couple nights since we talked about doing this show, he had a lot of problems with new talent coming into the locker room. He was very, very standoffish to new guys. Matt Stryker, a very good guy, New York, New Jersey guy, was one of the ones that was abused by Benoit. And basically, you know.
And I got to tell you, Ricky, I know you and I both know Matt Stryker. Matt's he is as laid back as you get.
Yeah. If you can't get along with
laid back guy.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things that happened to us is, and this is a funny story. I saved this. I didn't even tell you this because you told me let's just shoot on the air. I had a phone call from Colt Cabana on a Friday afternoon. I believe it was Friday. I don't remember. It might have been Tuesday night SmackDown at that time, but I don't remember. I was at work, and I worked in a hospital. I was an administrator. And Colt Cabana, who is really not even a close friend of mine, we don't speak to this day at all, period. But he called me up, and he said, hey, how far are you from Binghamton, New York? And I said, 4 hours. And he said, listen, I'm standing next to Vince. Vince said if you can get here in 3.5 hours with 8 guys, there's a big bonus in it for you. And I said, what? And the guys who were supposed to do the extra work didn't show up. So I called all of my guys, Kevin Matthews, Danny DeMonto, a referee, Matt Bennett, who's pretty famous right now, Justin Carino, a bunch of guys. We jumped in my Hummer, and we got there in 3.5 hours. And Vince McMahon was completely appreciative of this. And we got there, and it was with the Triple H against Edge segment where they were doing it. And basically our job was we were playing security. I hit it off with Triple H a little bit. We had some mutual friends, and there was a segment where it looked good. I actually held Triple H back. I was 300 pounds at the time. I was a big guy. He said to me, you work with me the rest of the night. I don't care what's in the script. You come with me. We need this to look real. Great. So now my shoes and my bag are in this tent, and we were also with the New British Bulldogs and Natalie at the time. Sure enough, I come back up to the second segment, and we walk to the back. And one of my guys looks at me and just shakes his head. And I go, what's up? And he said, all of our clothes are destroyed. Your shoes are cut into 1,000,000 pieces. And he's like, this is bullshit. We didn't come all the way here as a favor for this to happen. I said, just stay calm, guys. You guys are wrestlers. I'm not. I don't give a shit if I ever come back again. But you guys have a future here. So we're getting ready to leave at the end of the night. And Mr. McMahon walks up to me and he says, can I see you a minute? And I said, yes, sir. And I walk over. And he says, go upstairs and get your draw. But this is for making it here faster. I said, well, thank you very much. And he handed me a very nice sum of money. And I said, thank you. And I go to walk away, and the back of my pants are slashed and my shoes are on. And he looks at me and he goes, you're fucking kidding me, right? And I said, no, sir. And he goes, that happened here? And I said, yeah, somebody sabotaged the whole tent. All of our shit's ruined. And he looked at me and he says, you came here as a personal fucking favor to me. And he looked at me and he said something, and I heard the name come out of his mouth. He goes, fucking Benoit. And he walks over to me and he handed me a stack of money. And he said, you buy everybody new shoes, new clothes, and we'll see you next Monday night and I'll pay you again. And Vince kind of just knew without even saying a word. He's like, that dick did this to you guys.
Yeah.
And that was my first experience with him on that level. I didn't know he was that sadistic. Now, he knew me from Dennis. He worked Dennis shows. I worked in the ECW locker room a few times.
Right.
I'm not going to say I was a regular there, but I was in the locker room for different reasons with Paul.
Sure.
And he was just never someone you ever felt like you could be close to. And that's a point I'm going to come up later in the show with him and Eddie.
Gotcha. Go ahead, Murph.
Didn't really know Chris personally. I met him once or twice. I think I met him once with Steve Carino and a couple other guys. I mean, in the indie circuit, a lot of the guys that are on Monday Night Raw, SmackDown, that kind of thing, unless we're buying a ticket, we really don't get a chance to, meet and socialize with these guys that much.
Sure.
I can honestly say I never really heard anything bad about them. I mean, Ricky, you worked a lot closer to them than I did. The whole thing, ever since this happened from day one, something, and I've said this before, and I've caught a lot of heat for it, something about the whole thing never sat right with me, and it didn't add up.
Yeah.
I can go into that later on in the show if you like, or I can say something now if you want.
Well, let's go into that later because I'm going to touch on something later as well. But thank you, Mike Kelleher. Being the one guy here that's not in the wrestling business, as a fan, when you heard that Chris Benoit had been killed, what was your first reaction, just from a fan standpoint?
Well, if it hadn't been on the networks, like the ABCs, NBCs, like CNNs, I would have thought it was an angle. Because at the time, they were blowing up cars, running over people. Like, it was all kinds of weird things to try and, make it look like people were getting murdered.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was shocking. It was unbelievable at first. And then it just kind of sank in. And
to your point, Mike, we should also point out, to your point, it's not the first time that a death angle has been done. And
they were shooting Vince's death that evening, Angel. The script for the show on Monday Night Raw that night was Vince dying. People forget about that. That's why all the boys were in suits. That's why everybody was dressed up. It was supposed to be Vince's funeral.
Yeah. And so, and that ties right into my point, because initially, I'm inside the loop, in the bubble, if you want to call it that. And I'll be honest with you, I thought everybody was being worked. I did. I thought it was worked. Until I realized that Vince came out to an empty arena, and I thought, oh, something's amiss here. Something doesn't sound right. We should point out that depending on who you listen to, Chris Benoit died either June 24th or June 22nd, 2007, depending on what frame of death you wish to use, but we know it's somewhere between the 22nd and 24th. We're going to talk a little bit about what led up to it, or what possibly led up to it. Ricky, I'm going to bring you in because I know you have an interesting theory, and I want you to share that with everybody. And you and I have talked about this privately, and I just said to you, and I want everybody to know, none of this was pre-planned, so I'm just going to ask Ricky O to go ahead and shoot.
Well, the first thing is, I want to touch on something real quick before I get to that theory. If you watch the Vice show, you go back and you re-watch or relive a lot of the newscasts, he did kill himself a day to a day and a half later. So any conspiracy theories with the body temperature and the death right there should go out the window. He was dead a day and a half later. That's what's that to me was the proving point. Working in the medical field for 25 years, it's hard to change body temperature. It's not like and there's no reason to lie about that. There's no reason why a coroner will come in or a policeman will come in and change the time of death. So that to me was the telling factor. Now the theory I think is Eddie Guerrero is the complete opposite human being to Chris Benoit. Eddie Guerrero was nice. Eddie Guerrero was friendly to his fans. Eddie Guerrero was a caring family man who came from a fifth generation or so of professional wrestlers. His family protected this business. Eddie had his demons, but when Eddie was on his game, he was deeply spiritual. He was a family man, and he was a loving, giving father and husband. Now, to me, and this is just my opinion expressed by me, I sense a very underlining, deeper, maybe love interest that took place here. Was Chris Benoit in love with Eddie Guerrero? There's talk about reading the Bible in their underwear. They're talking about the two of them sharing beds and falling asleep in each other's arms. Little hints about stuff like that, which back 15 years ago was extremely taboo. The world's come around to a different thing now. Homosexuality now is accepted. It's on every television show, every commercial, and God bless it. And to quote Jerry Seinfeld, not that there's anything wrong with that, God bless everybody. Let them love everybody. Let's get through this freaking fucking virus and everybody go out and fuck everybody. Who cares? But at that time, 2 male rhinos would not have been accepted in the world. And if you look at it, the cause of Eddie's death, Eddie died and Chris spiraled completely out of control. You can take all the CTE, you could take the drugs and the steroids. Listen, how many of us are on roids or been on roids or workers we know have been on roids and they're not dead? Hulk Hogan is the prototypical pitcher boy of steroids. He's still alive, okay? So there's a theory to steroids and there's a theory about taking shots to the head, and both are dangerous. But when emotion gets caught up into this, there's nothing more dangerous than a lover scorned or someone who loses someone at the time of death. And I personally feel the relationship between Eddie and Chris maybe just needs to be expanded a little. And again, I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying this is something that went through my mind and a theory I had.
Well, we have to lend at least a little credibility to the theory because it actually came out within the first, I'm going to say the first month that I'll call it the incident, because we can speculate as to whether it was a murder-suicide, a hit, whatever you want to call it. And there are some credible theories as to all of the above, quite frankly. And that's what I wanted to do tonight, was explore that. But Ricky, you bring up a point. There have been those people who early on in the investigation suggested a homosexual angle. So I'm not going to discount that, and I'm certainly not going to say, on the other hand, that it's absolutely true. But is it possible? Absolutely, it's possible. Mike Murphy, you have an interesting theory as well. Share your theory with me and everyone else.
My theory doesn't go as far as, Chris and Eddie being together. I mean, and nowadays, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if that's what it was, that's what it was. What a person does behind closed doors, none of my fucking business. There was some, I found out about it. I had just come back off the road that weekend from doing a show, and I was getting ready to go to work Monday morning, and I pick up my phone, and a manager friend of mine, Chucky D, left a message for me. He says, hey, brother, call me when you get a chance. Benoit's dead. And I was just in total shock the whole day.
Mikey, did you think it was an angle?
No. One thing I knew about my friend Chucky was that, I mean, he's like a walking wrestling encyclopedia. If he says something's going on, then you can take that to the bank. I then gotten a call from a radio show in Philadelphia, the Barsky Show. They had a guy on there, they called him Vinny the Crumb. They knew me,
sure,
they're the wrestler. So they called me up and they wanted to talk to me about it. I said, guys, look, I just found out today. It's a sad day. Give me a couple days and, call me then.
Sure.
A couple days later, they called me back and it all went into roid rage. Oh, well, was it roid rage? Did you take steroids? It's like, I'm thinking to myself, this isn't what the fuck you called me about. You wanted to talk about Chris Benoit and what happened. Let's talk about what happened. Through this whole thing, there were some questions that I don't think were asked that should have been asked.
Mikey, and let me interrupt you for a second. I want to pick up where you left off on the roid rage. That was, and it seemed, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ricky, but it seemed at the time that was the blanket statement for every violent act that every wrestler ever committed. It was, they were on roid rage. They were, they had concussion. They had concussion syndrome.
The media had two buzzwords at the time: concussion and steroids, and they tried to tie every single thing to those two. Look at the National Hockey League. Now, I'm a big hockey historian. You had the deaths of Derek Boogaard, Mark Rippon, Wade Belak, all within a couple of weeks. And the first thing they said was concussions. They all killed themselves because of concussions. No, Wade Belak killed himself jerking off. He did that autoerotic asphyxiation thing, and he died jerking off. But yet, they don't tell you about that. Listen, it's a sad way to die, but that's how he died. He didn't die from a concussion. The media needs to stop. It's just like what's going on with this virus. If you watch the right side of the news, we've got a cure coming and everybody's getting better. And if you watch the left side of the news, we're all going to die in 6 minutes and Chris Benoit is going to rise from the dead and he's going to be the world champion. You have to look at facts.
Right.
Okay. And the facts of this case are there's a woman, her son, and a man dead, all in the same house at different times and different parts of that evening and that weekend. And the telling point to me, and I discussed this with you, Angel, when William Regal, the night of the death, refused to speak about his death, and he said he was a great wrestler, he gave a lot to the business, and he didn't want to discuss Benoit as a person, because now when it comes out, Regal knew he had given Nancy some beatings. The police had been at the house multiple times, and he knew he was nuts. Okay. Yeah. And they also talk a lot on the show on Vice, but they also talk a lot behind the scenes. A lot of people said Benoit has been beating the shit out of her for years. She missed appearances for Black and Blues. She did not make a convention because she had black eyes. So he had been hitting her. Now, is that a sample of roid rage? Very possible. Is it a sample of the guy couldn't handle being around a woman? Maybe she found out about something. Maybe she said to him, I'm leaving you. He snaps. He kills her first, realizes he's going to jail for life. They had a special needs child, I believe. I don't want him to be misquoted here, but I believe his son had special needs. And then
absolutely.
And then he killed himself.
Yeah, his son Daniel had a growth defect and he was autistic. That's factual. That can be proven by not only the official case study of this, but by family and friends. One of the things I want to point out is that Chris Benoit, before he was married to Nancy, also known as Nancy Sullivan, Nancy Benoit, he was married to a woman named Martina Benoit from 1992 to 1997. That marriage ended because of domestic violence.
Right.
That's factual. That's factual. That is not my opinion or speculation. That's factual. And there's supporting documentation that will more than verify and validate that assertion. That said, what about a guy that's just completely overly possessive and compulsive? My understanding is that Chris Benoit, Ricky, was an extremely jealous guy, very compulsive and obsessive in his nature, and that he, by and large, kept to himself from the other guys, or what we call the boys, because A, because he wasn't well liked, or B, because he wasn't very sociable. What's your take on it?
Oh, I think he was super respected by everybody in the business. I don't think anybody worked harder to be the prototypical greatest professional wrestler of all time than he. Problem is, he comes across as an introvert and maybe a little bit of a social disorder. If you've been around Chris, again, it was very quiet. It was look away when we speak. It wasn't a lot of eye contact. Yet you talk wrestling or you got in the ring, he became the rabid Wolverine. He lived his persona, but at the ring, he almost came across as a little bit more of a bookwormy, like a small man complex almost. But yet, meanwhile, he's one of the baddest dudes in the whole world. So there was two sides to him. And one thing that we haven't touched on was Nancy. Nancy Sullivan was
we're going to touch on
not the most beautiful woman in the history of professional wrestling. She invented the position of women manager, women valet, and she did it better than anybody else in the history of this business. Now, that's a lot to carry, because what happens at the time is listen, Angel, we all run shows. Guys, you work shows. No matter how good the main event is, if you throw a chick out there with giant bazookas in a bikini to wrestle, the guys are all going to line up and take her picture at intermission. Okay, so you got to carry that around too. You have the hottest woman in the business, and she's your wife, and everybody's looking at her. And let's just remember one thing: there's no fucking loyalty in a locker room. I don't care who you are. Every guy in that room is trying to beg your wife, your daughter, your sister, your cousin. I had my daughters banned for wrestling. They never came to a fucking show until I ran a fundraiser for my child's wrestling team in her high school. And Big Van Vader was the star. And my daughter was 16, and my other daughter was 12. And my 16-year-old walked by the table, and Big Van Vader, rest in peace, goes, Jesus Christ, look at the ass on that little bitch. And my 12-year-old turned around and looked and goes, "That's my fucking sister, asshole." She's underage.
Good for her.
That's what I was like. And then I realized, but it's you got men who are amazing athletes. I'm never going to take away from wrestling. They are amazing athletes. They have to be in better shape and physically capable of doing more than any other athletic event in the world. But they're narcissistic. They lack attention. They have to have that crowd reaction. And if they don't have to have that, then they're not good at what they do. So when that starts to fade out, or your wife maybe outshines you a little, that creates tensions in the home also.
Well, we saw that happen too with Mark Merrow and Sable. Absolutely. Go ahead, Mike.
Bob, something I wanted to touch on that Ricky O had brought up. Benoit, a technical wrestler beyond belief, no doubt. There's no argument there. One of the best that there was. I would even go and say, and I've heard it said, Olympic caliber professional or Olympic caliber wrestler.
Absolutely.
Which brings up one of my questions. Nancy, when Nancy was found, Bible by her head and her hands and feet were bound. That's one of the things that never set right with me. One,
I can understand it.
Two, he can choke somebody out without blinking an eye. Why tie her up?
Good question. We're going to talk about it.
Boom. She's done. Why tie her up? The Bible next to the head, to me, now I come from a law enforcement family. I've had it shoved down my throat since I was 5 fucking years old. The Bible next to the bed, or next to Nancy, shows me remorse.
Remorse.
That there was remorse there.
There's a lot.
Okay, and the question has always been, though, who was the one remorseful? And that brings up my theory, and my theory is a little off the beaten path, but I think there's, in the last 6 to 8 months, some substantial evidence, some circumstantial, some directly tied to it, that Chris Benoit was either involved with A, drug gang, or B, the mafia. Because what I'm seeing in the crime scene analysis looks like a hit. But there's only one problem. If you're involved with the mob and you owe them money, their business is with you, not with your wife and child. And anybody who knows the ethics, strange as it sounds, I'll use air quotes, the ethics of the mafia is that it's just business. Business is business, and it's nothing personal. What would they have to gain by killing, a 10-year-old boy, and a woman who weighed maybe 110 pounds soaking wet?
Right, exactly. They say no women or kids.
The other thing that bothered me was the incredibly large cachet of human growth hormones and steroids found in Benoit's home. Far more than personal use, by the way, which leads me to think he was either A, distributing on behalf of someone, or B, was involved with individuals who wanted that distributed on the street. Ricky, your opinion on this?
My opinion on the first theory you mentioned about being an organized hit, I don't believe in it. I don't see it. Like you said, it's not the culture to whack a child or a wife over a husband's business. Family's off limits. We all know that. It's not a movie freaking role. It's something a lot of people believe in, and I'll leave it at that because I don't want to incriminate anybody or myself in that statement. Second, I personally believe he had to get bigger. He had to come across as bigger. Everyone who talks about Vince McMahon, if you're not 6'5" or bigger, he doesn't have any use for you. He did not want to push Eddie and Chris. Eddie and Chris forced that push on him. He revolutionized the WWE with Eddie and Chris being those two guys. He did it with Kurt Angle first, but don't forget Kurt Angle's an Olympic gold medalist, okay?
Sure.
And bringing to your point that you made, Angle called him an Olympic quality pro wrestler. Kurt Angle said he was the first guy to ever match him in intensity and anything, which makes the bondage situation more confusing. But listen, I I think the problem here is, and I'm gonna bring something up that's very near and dear to my heart. The problem here was the spousal abuse here that took place years before the murder that no one did anything about. You have Malenko's wife, who's a psychiatrist, discussing that she knew she was getting beatings. Regal knew she was getting beat up. Johnny Grunge went to the house on video to try to calm Chris down during an episode because woman called him and said, he's out of control, he's going to hurt me, and we need help. At some point, I know in New York and New Jersey, I don't know the laws down in Georgia. I know in New York and New Jersey, a police officer can come to a scene of a crime and say, hey, I feel this is happening here. Domestic violence is taking place. You're leaving and we're going to take you in. I don't know the laws there. But it's as simple as if somebody would have really fucking cared. Don't sit here and cry on a Vice fucking channel. Don't sit here and tell me that your life is this and you can't sleep at night. You can't sleep, motherfucker, because you let him beat her and a kid to death. You allowed this for years to take place because he was a fucking money train. And the only thing that matters in pro wrestling is attach yourself to the fucking money train. Let's get a fucking payday out of it, okay? Maybe some of these motherfuckers taking chair shots and everything. Everybody wants to talk about New Jack. You know who the realest motherfucker in the game is? New Jack. He's mastered it. He is the motherfucker he portrays, okay? Chris Benoit was a fucking wife beater piece of shit. Okay, this is a sensitive subject to me. I grew up in a domestic violence family. I don't fucking appreciate it. You're a piece of shit. You're a fucking coward, and I hope you're getting ass raped by Hitler and fucking in hell right now every day of your life because you beat your fucking wife. You're not a fucking tough guy when you do that. You're a piece of shit. And what happened here is a lot of people look the other way when it comes to celebrities. Ray Rice, right? Ray Rice punched his fucking wife in the face in the Brigada in Atlantic City. Do you know who picked that video up from the security guard to deliver to TMZ? You're looking at the fat fuck. And you know who saw Ray Rice? You know when my opinion changed on this? When I pulled into the fucking Brigada and Ray Rice and his wife were outside holding hands 12 hours after he knocked her out in the elevator, okay? Because, you know why? Money means more than safety. Money means more than being comfortable in your way of life. And some people, and I'm not saying Nancy was this way, because she could have probably made her own money and she might have had a nice bank account. She stayed with a fucking wife beater, okay? So the circumstances around this are she ended up dead from a domestic violence family. And this is what should not happen in this world today. It's 2020. We don't need to be beating women. We don't need to be beating children. There's circumstances in the world where people lose it. I think the combination of CTE and I think the combination of heavy, as you said, not just human for himself. He had a fucking room full of steroids. He had a factory coming into it. It goes to say that WWE does not have a quality testing program. It does not have a domestic violence program. And we lost.
Well, you know, and we talk about this cache of steroids and human growth hormones. Mike Kelleher, do you think he was treated differently because of his celebrity status? Do you think the police showed up a few times and slapped him on the hand and said, "Don't do that, be a good boy"?
It's entirely possible. I mean, there's so many times you see, if you're lucky enough to hear about a celebrity getting any kind of spat or squabble, you see them, so-and-so went to court today for their hearing and they got probation, or they got, you know, they had to pay a fine or some so minor slap on the wrist. But if any one of us had done it, we would have been, you know, in jail for who knows how long.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah,
what are your thoughts about this? You've heard some theories bantered here. So what are your thoughts? What do you think happened?
You know, every time I think I've got a clear path to what I believe, something new pops up.
Well, tell us what you think.
Well, I mean, you know, that Ricky O's point about you know, was there a true love interest between Eddie and Chris? Like, that's fascinating to me, because the real linchpin of that is if Chris's wife found out about this relationship, and it ties into what Ricky was saying, she was going to leave, and maybe that was what set him off. It was like, I know the timeline doesn't quite line up that way, but I'm just saying, like, maybe prior, she learned about it and they kind of worked through it. All I'm saying is that angle is really interesting. Personally, I'm at a place where I'm not 100% convinced that it was a hit. I'm willing to listen and evaluate all the options, but so far I'm not in that it's a hit.
Okay, there was, if you believe the story, Ricky, there was a series of text messages made from both Chris Benoit's phone and from Nancy's phone to a variety of people, Chavo Guerrero being one, Dean Malenko being another, and I'm wanting to say two more, but I can't honestly recall their names right now. But there were 3 or 4 text messages. They all said the same thing. They were all sent from both phones at the same time. But here's what doesn't add up to me, Ricky. If you believe the timeline of these texts to these people, Chris was already dead. So was Nancy. So was Daniel. How does a dead man text to 4 different telephones?
There's a lot of undetermined factors here. There's also the Wikipedia page was supposedly altered the night saying he was dead, and he wasn't dead yet. There was a murder at his house. People about that the original time when the pay-per-view hit the air, it was supposed to be his big match against CM Punk that evening, which both guys were really heavily looking forward to going at it. So that's another thing too. His frame of mind was okay supposedly before this happened. So there's the Wikipedia, there's the text messages, there's a lot of unturned the web searches on his computer that came up. Now that hasn't really ever been brought up before, Viceland. That was very. And
I'm glad you brought it up. I'm glad you brought it up, Ricky. So let's go there. Tell everybody what we're talking about.
How to kill yourself quick and painlessly was one of the searches, and how to give your child narcotics to knock them out. And it came down to Xanax and a mixture of some pills for his son, and then the weightlifting, the lat pull-down machine being wrapped around his own neck with 200 pounds on. He released it, and he allegedly snapped his own neck.
Well, I have a problem with that, Ricky. I have a real problem with that. Mike, you want to kind of tell Ricky what your theory about that is? Because you and I have an issue with this.
My theory is...
How does a guy pull down 250, 260 pounds with one hand, wrap a wire cord around his neck, and then release it? Explain this to me. How does that happen?
I don't think, in my own opinion, I don't think he did it himself. I think what happened was, my theory is, I think he came home in the middle of it. And because if you notice, they said there was no forced entry into the house. So it had to be somebody he knew. Somebody they trusted. Now, again, how does the person, he hung himself by his weight machine. Now, how do you hold 250, 260 pounds in one hand, hold it up enough to where the cable's loose enough, wrap it around your neck, and then let it go? I don't think physically it can be done.
Well, we know he was a pretty strong guy, but I don't think he had the strength to. Unless you have a theory about that. How does a guy pull down 250, 260 with one hand and have enough foresight to put a 1/4-inch wire cable around his neck and then release it?
When there's a will, there's a way. Now, did he? I'm not saying. I don't know if he did it or not. I wasn't there, and I hope to God I'm never in a situation where I want to hang myself with a fucking weightlifting machine. But I can only imagine somebody pulling it down in front of them, putting slack on the wire, and putting it once around his neck. 250 pounds to that guy is 25 pounds to me and you. I mean, let's be honest. The guy was brutally strong. I mean, I don't know.
True.
But the machine and the theory of hanging himself with the machine is something that I have seen in movies. I have seen, and I know that doesn't make any sense. I've seen it in a movie, but the way they've done it in a movie was they've had slack around it, put it around their neck, and released it, just like a garage door opener in The Sopranos. There's a will, there's a way. You could put a block of wood under the 250 pounds or something under the 250 and kick it out with your leg when you're ready to have it snap.
Well, you know, it's a case of art imitating life or life imitating art, depending on how you want to look at it. I've always been unsettled with a couple of things. The biggest thing for me, and probably all of you will agree with it, if you got a problem with your wife, if it's truly a problem with your wife, deal with your wife. Why the need to kill your kid? He doesn't understand what's happening. He's not capable of responding to that, and he's not capable of fighting you back. But for that kid to die with a broken back, with somebody with such incredible strength.
No, I didn't hear about a broken back.
Well, no, I think you got the two mixed up here. He drugged his son and smothered him with a pillow. He broke Nancy's back with the pillow.
Okay, Nancy, I'm sorry. You're right. Thank you, Rick.
Thereof.
What's it say again, Mike?
I said the broken back on Nancy. I heard that she had been choked out. I didn't hear that her back had been broken.
He had put his knee in her back and snapped her neck, according to the show on Vice.
And we should say, according to the show on Vice, which, by the way, was not drawn from the official police transcript. And much of the information given was from a book author who I never quite frankly heard of. And again, quite frankly, I don't buy a lot of his theories. That's just me. If anybody
I
would
read
like
the book. I did read the book, and it goes into a lot of Chris being at a very early age, almost self-masochistic, going over to New Japan and being beaten up as a young boy, sleeping on the floor, pissing in a toilet, on the floor is the toilet in front of the guys, rubbing their feet, washing their asses after it's the young boy training in Japan, which became almost S&M-like, if according to the details of this book.
Yeah, and Rick, you might, not to interrupt you, but I'm going to for a minute, but my understanding about that, and I know a little bit about that, my understanding is that it was his way of self-disciplining himself. That's, and you apparently heard the same thing. If you know the Japanese culture, they're very much into self-punishment as a means of discipline. Punish thyself first, and do good to others. It's kind of it's almost oxymoronic, but it's a way of life.
Over here in the States, punish thyself has a different meaning.
Exactly right.
Well, and Angelo, don't forget also the Japanese also really, really, really hold hierarchies very, very dear to their culture. So
it's a very good point. Very good point. So, Ricky, let's talk about that. Talk about the discipline aspect.
Well,
By all accounts, he was very much into discipline.
He was into disciplining himself. There's all the stories on the shoot interviews and everything else you read. He'd have a bad match. He'd miss a move. He'd go in the locker room and he'd do 500 Hindu squats. He'd do 1,000 push-ups and sit-ups after working an hour-long match that nobody saw anything wrong with except for himself. He was constantly critique himself. Now, how do you get to be the best at what you do? You critique yourself and you make yourself better. But there's also a point of where you become obsessed. And the obsession here took over this man's life. And I think, unfortunately, to push himself from whatever he was, I don't know exactly how tall he was. Was he 5'11", 5'10"? 6 even.
Well,
maybe.
I will tell you that right now. As a matter of fact, he was 5'10", 238 pounds at the time of his passing.
Okay. 238 pounds on that frame is gigantic. That guy should be in the 175 to 190 pound range. He's carrying 50 pounds of enhanced muscle from artificial sources. Okay.
Sure.
So there's got to be something to the chemical dependency, the obsessive compulsiveness of it, and the fact that he just was traumatized mentally from having a brain of an 86-year-old man.
Well, and we're going to talk about that right now, as a matter of fact. We're talking about in pro wrestling, 5'9", 5'10" is a small guy, relatively speaking. Eddie Guerrero was, I believe, 5'9", 5'10". They were both about the same size, pretty much the same build, right, Ricky? Mike, you know that, right? They're same size, same build?
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're talking about two guys that are relatively small at that time on the roster compared to guys that were 6'4", 6'7", 6'8", a couple of 7-footers, 300 plus pounds. So you're talking about a couple guys, by all accounts, that are small. Let's use that word, okay, small. But they made up for it in sheer width and girth. If you look at Benoit, he had short legs, but a jacked up upper body. His upper body looked like it belonged on a guy 6'5". Despite the fact that his legs were relatively diminutive size. And Eddie as well was a small guy. But again, very, very well built for their size. And they could do things, those two guys, that nobody else could do. Athletically, technically, they were both superior amateur wrestlers, both skilled athletes in other sports, and by the way, really fucking strong, okay? But if you take a guy of that stature, I don't care how much human growth hormones you take, you're not going to get taller. You'll only get wider. There's only so. Yeah, I mean, you can't get. I mean, you can get as wide as the broad side of a barn, but you're not going to get any taller than you are.
I myself just had a physical not too long ago. I'm 5'11", and not proud of it, but I'm 280 pounds right now. I've put on a little extra weight since retirement. I will admit that. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Ricky, please continue.
No, I was just saying, your head gets bigger. It's a known fact. Ask Barry Bonds. He had the very large inflated cranium. If you look at his forehead, he did have all the signs of somebody who's using HGH. The study on the body is undetectable. It's kind of crazy is that human growth hormone is not naturally detected in a normal steroid test also. I don't know if that's, common knowledge. You have to have a special test to determine it in your system, and that's why Major League Baseball players got away with it for so long. That's why, I'm going to expose a little bit on the wrestling business, and I'm sure you guys know this. You're both in it. There's something called levels. When you enter a company, when you were hired in the 80s and the 90s and early 2000s, you were able to come in at your levels. So if your testosterone level was 265, you could not vary within 10% of that while you were hired. Now, there's no human number for testosterone produced. Angel might be 290. Me, I might be one. Mark and Mike, you guys might be 300 naturally. Okay, so now you're ingesting 10 cc's of this on a weekly basis, and you're bringing yourself up to 500 before you go into the company. Now you can go as high as 550 or as low as 450, and you're illegal. You're good. Don't worry about it, buddy. Your levels haven't changed. It's a natural increase. You're eating a lot of red meat. That's what the bullshit testing did in the wrestling companies, WCW and WWF. They came in at levels. They took a blood sample. They said, okay, his testosterone is this high. He can't go past that. But they also, if you remember, they always hired guys 90 days out or 6 months out, and they gave them time to prep to come in. That was to get their levels up. And
absolutely.
So you do that?
Sure.
So that everybody looks like the Vince McMahon cookie cutters. Look at the company now. You don't see one guy who looks different now than everybody else. You did. It was Bray
exactly.
Wyatt, and he's the most popular guy in the whole company. And they shit on that.
Exactly. Which speaks volumes, and that's a discussion for another show. But you touched on something, Ricky, that I want to direct to Mike Kelleher and Mike Murphy. Ricky mentioned that Benoit's brain was that of an 80-plus-year-old person. Okay, I will accept that as factual for now because I have nothing to dispute it. But Mike Kelleher, here's my question to you, and I'd like you to expound on it. How many 80-year-old men do you know that go around killing their wives and kids?
Absolutely none. But I also don't know any 80-plus-year-old men who had endured the physical impact that Chris Benoit did. So,
well, here's my point in asking you that.
Yeah.
If his brain was at such a decreased capacity, he wouldn't be able to perform at that high level. And he performed at a very, very high level for years. So how do you get around that? Mike Murphy.
I myself, Angela, you've known me in the business. You've seen me work and all. I myself have had at least 6 concussions. If you get into the professional wrestling business, guess what? You're going to get a concussion. It's unavoidable. I have now, and I'm 54. I just turned 54 this month. I have short-term memory loss, balance issues. Angela, you've seen it. We've gone out to dinner. You've seen me lose my balance, equilibrium, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And it's all from, hey, you're getting hit with a chair, you're getting hit in the turnbuckles, you get a spear and you snap your head back and you hit the ring. And,
Mike, how does a guy with
someone with an 80-year-old brain to compete at that high level? No. I don't think
that was going to be my question to you. How does a guy like that compete at that level on the biggest stage in the world and go undetected as either a sociopath, a psychopath, a ticking time bomb? Ricky, jump in here.
To me, I think the theory it came from Nowinski, the gentleman who went to Harvard and wrestled for the WWE for a little while, and he the concussion program. He's done a major, major good thing for the world with this. But the statement of an 80-year-old man, I agree with you. Now, if you ever saw the movie Concussion and you saw the Mike Webster story early on in the show and about his brain being mush, there's got to be facts to that. And like Mike just said, this poor gentleman's 56 years old. He's losing his equilibrium, his balance. Your head, you only get one brain, guys. It's not like you can lose a finger and you still have 9 more. You only got one brain. And when that starts to rot, we don't know the effects of this. We're the first generation now that's dying of steroids, okay? Was your people who were in the late 80s, early 90s. These people are now dying in their early 40s, their 50s. Look at the WrestleMania show. What's left from Mania? How many people are left from the early 80s, WWE starting to run? Big Boss Man. All of these guys have passed. Kurt Hennig. There's got to be Hawk. There's got to be something to the mixture of steroids into the human body that we don't know enough about to make that determination. Everybody says we're turning into zombies, and that's always the funny thing. Oh, this is the next zombie thing. Think about what steroids are doing to people. They make you drink. I've got friends of mine that graduated at 150 pounds, high school, 18 years old, 150 pounds, and by the time they were 24 years old, they couldn't put their arms down. Okay, they had size 58 chests with 24-inch arms that made Hogan look small. Okay, And these are local guys who used to fool around in a nightclub as bouncers and charge chicks $10 each to whip needles into their ass as a joke. Okay, this stuff takes over your mind. This stuff takes over, like it's a persona thing. You have to be the man. You have to be the best looking, the biggest, the most physically fit, the biggest arms. I wish I could rock a beard like Mike has right now. That thing's awesome. But what else do these guys have to go through in life? You're putting yourself up there in spandex tights in front of, hopefully, let's just say on a big crowd, 8 to 50,000 people on the big stage. Okay.
Right.
You've got lights and everyone in the world is looking at you. You're a sex symbol to every woman out there, hopefully, or men, if that's your thing. And you have to constantly look good because the next kid coming up is going to knock you off the pedestal. He's going to have bigger arms, bigger calves, throw a higher drop kick.
Well, you know what, Ricky, let's talk about that. There was some talk, and you know where I'm going to go with this, Ricky, because you had a little inside track on it. There was some talk that Chris was perhaps on his way out and was doing, all of these, different drugs and growth hormones to keep his spot, to be competitive. And I can certainly understand the competitive nature of the business, but to your knowledge, given what you know and what you've heard, is there any truth to that? Was he trying to protect his spot?
Everybody's trying to protect his spot. I think right now Triple H is protecting his spot, and he's the owner's son, their son-in-law. There's always the fear in this business of someone is looking over your shoulder to take your spot. And that's one of the things that in professional wrestling is out of control. It's the paranoia. Even as a promoter, every time I ran a fucking building, somebody would call the building the next day and try to steal it. I remember I was going to have a show with Tommy Dreamer on it. 20 years later, after ECW, somebody sent the building the video of him power driving Beulah.
Well, I got news for you. I'll go you one better. Mike Murphy, you remember the show we did that they shut us down because a young lady appeared with a rather revealing costume on.
Yes, and
Mike was on the show.
She actually came with me. She was my valet.
She was,
and she didn't even realize. She just thought it was a sexy outfit. And I remember that show. I wrestled Big Slam Vader that night.
Yeah, Big Slam. Yeah.
And
because she had her tan lines were showing. Okay.
Yeah, we caught some heat for that. She had
a thong outline, and they shut us down.
But the funny thing is, she sold more pictures than the Rock and Roll Express.
And that's what Ricky was talking about. That's what Ricky was talking about. So
I did a show once in Lyndhurst, New Jersey in 1990. I had Public Enemy, I had the Dudleys, I had Gilbert as the WWF light heavyweight champion defending his title on my show. 1,600 people sold out. Okay, and I had Deuce, Jimmy Snuka's son, on that show. There was a lot, low key, the Hit Squad. These guys went on to become very famous workers, right? Do you know who made the most money? Wasn't on the show. She said to me, "Can I set up a merch table?" Bobcat, very good friend of mine. You know how she did it? She went and laid on a copy machine with her breast. Okay, took a nude photo and then took a nude photo and drew stars over all her intimate parts and copied those on copy paper. I'm not talking photo paper, copy paper. And she sold them for $5 a piece, and she walked out of there with almost $1,000 in 15 minutes. Don't tell me that the sex angle in wrestling doesn't sell. These guys come there, they want to see fights and they want to see tits. And this is what goes back to me a half hour ago saying, this man had to live with the most famous woman in the history of the business if you look at talent and if you look at beauty. Was there better wrestlers than women? Of course. Was there more beautiful women than women? Yes. But together, she was the greatest in the business that we ever seen. Her character with Kevin Sullivan, second to none. Her character.
Well, now you brought something up. Now you brought something up. We're going to go there. The Kevin Sullivan factor. We should point out that this is not factual. This is speculation. What is factual and documented is that Kevin Sullivan, during his marriage to Nancy Sullivan, a.k.a. Nancy Benoit, was in fact arrested a couple of times for domestic and spousal abuse. That's factual. That's factual. That is not speculation. What is speculation, however, is that Chris Benoit was somehow the victim of a Kevin Sullivan receipt, a receipt that happened some almost 3-4 years before, where Kevin Sullivan is seen and heard on video, by the way, so I'm not making it up, saying, Benoit, you'll pay for this one day. That's factual. Tell me if I'm lying, Ricky.
You're not lying. It's just a blurred line. You're talking about a person who played a character on TV for 20 years as being the Taskmaster, and before that being the devil himself. Kevin Sullivan does the indie scene right now and still makes T-shirts that say the devil is here. Kevin Sullivan played a character on Florida Championship Wrestling, better character in the history of professional wrestling. He took a satanic angle without ever saying the word Satan once. If you go back and you watch this, Kevin Sullivan talks about this in all his shoot interviews. He never said the word Satan. He talked strictly out of Bible verses. He talked about names of Buddha Singh and things like that, and he just threw it all together. Then the rumors were, I can't tell you how many people I know in the professional wrestling business, guys that are 6'4", jacked out of their minds, steroid freaks that would come to me and go, I don't want to be in the locker room if you have Sullivan on the show. I'm afraid of him. He's satanic. He does this and he does that and he does all these, worshiping. He doesn't, okay? It's the best played character in the history of wrestling. And if you want to be a mark and sit here and say Kevin Sullivan killed him, Jesus Christ, don't you think the cops, the first thing they did was track down where Kevin Sullivan was? Don't
and they
was listed 50,000 times.
And we should point out that Kevin Sullivan has been questioned, has taken not one but several lie detector tests, and has passed them all. But there are still people, Mike Kelleher, who think that Kevin Sullivan was somehow involved in the untimely demise of Chris Benoit and his ex-wife Nancy. That being the case, why kill the little boy?
I would say if I were to put myself in that situation, anybody in that house has to go. Like, you can't, even if it's a young boy who with cognitive or other deficits, I would think it would just be too messy to leave somebody who could possibly identify the person who killed his mom and dad. So,
Ricky, what do you make of that?
Again, it's just me being a cynical fuck. Just hearing all the information and hearing now, listen, could a killer? I watch a lot of CSI. Also, could a killer go on Benoit's computer and type in things to incriminate him? Of course he could have. Did he kill him a day and a half later? He could have tortured him. He could have killed his kid 1 hour, his wife the next, made him watch, had him drugged up. God only knows. But if somebody whacks Benoit, yeah, you got to kill everybody in the fucking house, man. You can't leave anybody around to witness. I mean, that's just common. You're going to kill one, killing three doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, well, they say tie up all loose ends, right?
Yeah. Angelo, go
ahead, Mike.
It's just so long. So much time had passed between the time when Sullivan had I guess gotten out of the picture and Chris had come in, and I feel like that's a really you might hate somebody, but to go that long and then kill them.
Yeah, and you know what, Mike? You bring up a good point, and Ricky, you know this to be true, and so do you, Mike Murphy. If you hate someone to that level, and this is in response to those people who say, oh, Kevin Sullivan had something to do with it. Well, if that's the case, why on earth would Kevin Sullivan put the World Heavyweight Championship on Chris Benoit in WCW? He put the belt around him. You don't do that for somebody you don't like. You do that for somebody you think can draw you money. Ricky, there's only two things that are real in wrestling, the miles and the money.
That's right. And if you ever listen to Sullivan speak, he talks about the fact that he might not like Chris as a person, and he didn't like the fact that, he also had heard rumors, and Sullivan talks about this too, about Nancy getting beaten. Now, here's a guy who beat her, and he's feeling sorry for somebody else beating her. That's a little sick in your head if you think about it. But he talks about the respect and how hard Benoit worked, and he talked about putting a belt on him and seeing this. He wanted to put a rocket up his ass, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard. It's really hard to figure out. But one thing I know is that's one of the top 3 minds in the history of professional wrestling, and he thought Chris was talented enough to carry the strap. So that's a respect thing there. He could have easily just as said, we don't need this guy, put him in a match with Yvonne Sullivan and buried his career, and he didn't do that.
And there's another theory, Mike Murphy, being bantered around, and something you've heard about. And we're going to go ahead and name names here, because I'm going to go ahead and shoot. This is this show again, and I want to make sure that people understand this if you're just coming in. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the panelists and participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Wrestling with the Future Podcast Network, its affiliates, or Wrestling with the Future TV, including Facebook, YouTube, Daily Motion, Twitter, or any form of viable alternative social media platforming by which we broadcast. And the opinion content provided by our panelists or guests are their own opinion, including me, by the way, and are not intended to malign any person, persons, or group of people, corporations, or in any way to bring shame upon Chris Benoit and or his family and friends, including any and all members living or dead. So, that being said, for the second time, I'm going to say this. There are people who believe that Benoit had such a large cachet of human growth hormones and steroids because he was distributing for one Vincent K. McMahon. Mike Murphy, pick up the story from there, please.
No, I think he was distributing for Vince because he had more. They found more steroids in his house than for just personal consumption or personal use.
I want to cut you off there for 1 second. I'm going to say something I've never said in public before. And if I end up getting killed over this, just remember I said it on the show first. Vince McMahon would never be dumb enough to have a mainstream star ever distribute steroids. Now, was there a person that worked in Ohio Valley that distributed steroids and has been taken care of in the WWA to this day? Yes. I will never say the person's name out of respect because everybody's got to make a living, and I've done things in my life I'm not proud of. But there is a human being who was a feeder system of HGH and steroids to the WWE for over 20 fucking years, and he's still there. Leave it at that.
And if that's the case, then would it be out of the question for somebody to get away with murder undetected and still be able to make a living in professional wrestling, Mike Murphy?
Well, if you look at the amount of money that Vince McMahon has to pay someone to do it, keep it quiet, yeah, he's got the money to do it. I mean, when you have the kind of power and stroke and money that he has, pretty much do whatever you want. I mean, think about it. Vince Neil, Motley Crue, kills a drummer from another rock band, okay, spends millions of dollars in lawyer fees and all, spends a month in jail, and he's out. Okay, Vince McMahon indicted for steroids. Hulk Hogan testifies and all. Vince didn't do a second of time.
Nope, not a bit.
Okay, so, and that's where I thought, hey, you know what? If anybody could do the thing with the steroids and distribute it with it, well, he's done it before. He got caught doing it before. I personally think Benoit was distributing to the other wrestlers, in the locker room.
Ricky.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you heard that.
Well, like I said, I just have some inside knowledge on that, and I have knowledge on the time frame, and I just disagree with that. But was he distributing to his own inner circle? Possibly. Was he Listen, professional wrestlers, let me ask you a question. You're a local star in Philadelphia, right? But you're still a big deal to the people in your neighborhood. Everybody has their own local superstars. Everybody has their own people that they look to. And listen, I had the Hit Squad in from 2000 to 2006 or 7. If I brought them to my Lodi, New Jersey building, there was a bigger pop in there than Hogan. Okay, I could have brought any ECW, any WWE has been in there, and they couldn't get the pop the Hit Squad had. They were so popular, they didn't pay for food. We went to bars, they didn't pay for drinks. So now, did he have a gym? I heard he owned part of a gym. Was he selling to people in the gym? That's a possibility. These guys all have side hustles. You know what? There's the old theory. You get rich quick in this business, and you don't know what to do with your fucking money. You could pay Tony Atlas $1,000 at 8 o'clock, and at 8:15, somebody walked on his face for $850 of it, and he's asking you for a loan. Okay, these guys weren't bankers.
Let me just say something, Ricky. I'm not doubting. I wasn't doubting you at all. Because what you said, okay, in the time frame that you said it, that made me think. Like, okay, yeah. Why would Vince be the one to get his fingers dirty when he could have somebody else do it? So I'm not doubting you at all.
Oh no! I didn't take it that way at all. And I'll be honest with you, man. I grew up in a background that in New York City mob. Okay, everybody knows my background. Okay, family, everything. The movie The Godfather is based off of my uncle Willie Moretti. You don't know who he is? Look it up. Okay, that's my mom's godfather and uncle. The movie was based on his life from Martin Scorsese. I was always taught you never fucking rat, and you never, ever, ever let the boss get his hands dirty. Why would Vince ever tie himself to? He's a fucking billionaire. Why would he tie himself into $100,000 steroid scheme? But if he could have a guy do it for him, put him on the payroll for 50, and that guy's going to take all the heat, and that guy's going to be the one to go down. That's a fall boy. We all know what that is too, right, Angel?
No, I agree. I agree with you.
No, I just think that there's too much thought going on here. That as the four of us are all in this business, we got to realize something. We're all in it because we're egomaniacs. We're not in it for money because none of us are rich. I did 25 years in this business, and I've had years in the business where I put $150K in my pocket. And I've had years where I've lost so much money that I lost my wife and family over it. Okay. Oh, I had a show that was a sold show and the check bounced and I drove my car to Car Cash and sold my pickup truck to pay the boys. There's so many highs and there's so many lows in this business that it's impossible. Okay. But we're all in it because we want to be in it. And if we weren't there for that reason, you don't deserve to be in it. But the ego comes in. And with this case here, this is another case of an egomaniac who maybe felt slighted because he was small. He had small man complex, and something got out of control. Was it drugs? Was it his brain? Was it domestic? Hey, God only knows. He could have came home and Nancy could have had a fucking cock in her mouth, okay?
Well, and that we're actually going to go there. There were accusations. I don't want to say allegations because they were not alleged at the time. They are being alleged now. Of course, 13 years later, that Nancy Benoit was having an extramarital affair and got caught in the act.
Not uncommon.
Okay. That being said, Ricky, how likely is that scenario, in your opinion? And is it something Chris Benoit would have been irate enough to kill her over?
Listen, I don't know if she was having an affair. I just brought that point up because anything is possible because Chris is constantly getting badgered on this. And, you know, listen, I'm a man. You're a father. You're a husband. I'm sure you guys have been married, have children, whatever the case is. Somebody harms or you catch your wife in bed with another man, or you catch another man propositioning your wife, God only knows what's going to happen. I know I'm not going to sit down and be calm. I had the situation, like I said, with my daughter, where I was laughing because my little daughter handled it. But if it would have came down to Vader touched my kid, I would have punched him in the fucking face. I don't care if I take a beating. That's my blood. You know, you defend what you love. And some people go to an extreme.
We're going to talk about something now that has not been discussed before. You all know the name Rene Dupree, right?
Patterson's boy. Patterson's boy.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about that in a second, too. Mike Kelleher, do you know the name Rene Dupree?
No.
Okay. Mike Murphy, you know who Rene is?
I've heard the name, yes.
Okay. There's a name being bantered around here now, 13 years after the death of Chris Benoit. And I'm reading this directly from Yahoo News, by the way. Okay. So it's a credible source, and I want people to understand I'm reading directly. On the day that Chris Benoit was found dead, his former tag team partner, Biff Wellington, was also found dead in Canada. That's true.
I didn't know.
That's without dispute.
Never knew that.
In a recent interview, Rene Dupree makes the following claim. In a recent interview, former WWE star Rene Dupree shockingly revealed that another wrestler who had links with Benoit was found dead on the same day Chris Benoit allegedly died. During his interview with Hannibal TV, WWE veteran revealed that Biff Wellington, who was the former tag team partner of Chris Benoit, was found shot to death on the same day, June 24th, 2007. He said, and I quote, "I'd like to talk about one thing that nobody talks about. There was another body found on that day. Another wrestler died that day that nobody talks about, and he was kin to Chris. His name was Biff Wellington." Continuing on the topic, Dupree brought up how Benoit sent text messages to some of his friends before his death. We all know now those text messages were sent after he died. One of those texts went to the phone of Biff Wellington, who was already dead at the time. We all know there were text messages between different wrestlers and Chris, right? Question mark. I'd like to know if there was any communication between Biff Wellington and Chris, because that's an eerie coincidence to me. I think not, says Rene Dupree. Wellington, a former independent wrestler, wrestled in the Canadian Independent Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling, NJPW, for brief runs, but he had short runs as well with WCW and ECW. Now, you were part of ECW for quite a bit of time. So I'm curious, Ricky, if you've ever heard the name Biff Wellington around the ECW locker room.
I have, and a much respected professional. Well, I honestly did not know he died on the same day. I knew he's deceased. I did not know it was the same day. Super talented individual. They wanted to be the new British Bulldogs when they wrestled together. That was their dream. And just so you know, Rene Dupree is back in the WWE as a producer. He's hired again now. He works backstage.
Yeah, I know that.
And
go ahead, Mike.
I was Googling real quick Rene Dupree. He was in La Resistance, and I do remember that tag.
Yes.
So I know who he is. I just didn't recognize him.
We should also point out that Rene Dupree is a third-generation wrestler. His father and his uncle made up, if I remember, Ricky, tell me the name of their tag team.
Are you thinking of the Rougeaus?
No, not Jacques and Ramon.
Quebecers?
Say again, Mike?
The Quebecers?
No. Mikey Kelleher.
Sir.
Go real quick. Rene Dupree's father.
Yeah, I'm looking right now.
His cousin is Pierre Caroulet.
That's a good friend of mine.
PCO, I think they call him now. PCO, Pierre Caroulet.
Yeah. Ring of Honor World Heavyweight Champion. Carl is a good friend of mine, and he has a very strong opinion on this too now. His opinion was murder. I'll tell you that right now. When I used to be on the road with Carl, who was a good friend of mine, we shared many hotel rooms and trips up and down Maine and New Jersey a lot. He was close to this family, and he to this day thinks it was a murder. So, a lot of the boys do. It's so fascinating because I don't think everything came out. Eddie Guerrero, Chris Irvin, which is Chris Jericho, they did an amazing job of bringing out what they did on Vice. And you get a whole new side of Jericho on this thing, too, because, you see a human being that was distraught over this, okay?
Yeah.
But the boys still have more information than we'll ever have. That locker room, stuff doesn't come out of a locker room. Sometimes
I know. And you know something, Ricky, that's both an admirable quality, and Mike Murphy, you know that, sharing many locker rooms. What happens, it's like Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in the locker room stays in the locker room. That's both admirable, but it could also be, quite frankly, Ricky, a slippery slope, especially when legalities and life and death are involved. Because those boys don't talk, man. They don't talk.
Listen, Bruiser Brody was murdered in front of a whole fucking room full of people. You just had his beautiful wife on, and nobody wanted to be involved. All skip that island faster than, come on a gold tooth. There's certain things that you can't talk about. And again, it goes back to the roots of professional wrestling were formed from the mafia. Okay, people forget that. The mob backed pro wrestling. The mob guys backed their own companies. Vince used to pay off guys in New York and Boston to be able to run shows in their fucking union buildings. It's a culture that was bred. And you know what? It is honorable to a way. And then in other ways, like I said before, you're watching a woman and child. Well, I don't know if the child was beaten, but you definitely know the wife was being physically abused, and nobody said a word. So there's
Ricky, Ricky, you brought up a real good point, my friend. It is like the mob, because it was, in fact, pro wrestling came from the carnivals, and it came big time. Pro wrestling was backed in full and in part by the mafia, and let's just call a spade a spade. Okay, Vince McMahon's father, Vincent James McMahon, or Vince Sr. for a lack of a better term, built his entire company with mob borrowed money. That's factual. I can't make that up. I couldn't say it if it weren't true. And I would dare say that Vince probably has some connections now. Again, that's my opinion. I can't prove that, but it's my opinion. So, Mikey, what are you coming up with there, Kelleher?
Find their tag team name, but his name was Emily or Emile.
That's right. Yes.
Emile Dupree or Emily.
Emile Dupree. Thank you. Emile Dupree.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And so this guy comes from.
He promoted and ran Canada, which is how Vince got in with him. He had control over the Toronto and Montreal markets.
True. Which I believe now is, I think Hannibal owns it outright, does he not?
Who knows?
Devin Nicholson, no Hannibal?
Yeah, no comment.
Okay. I think I know where you're going with that. Okay.
I just, you know what? I'm not a big fan of his shoot interviews, and I'm not a big fan of the lack of research he does to prepare for a show. That's all.
Okay, fair enough. Again, that's your opinion, and you are protected legally because you have the right to your opinion. Mike Kelleher.
Yes, sir.
What do you think? Is it just all a big coinky-dink that Benoit's tag partner happens to be dead on the same day? Or you think there's more sinister, nefarious shenanigans going on here at play?
I'm curious how much contact Benoit and was it Biff?
Biff Wellington, yes.
Wellington. I'm curious to how much did they stay in contact after their
Well,
career?
apparently, Biff Wellington received a text messages from Benoit's phone to his phone. Unfortunately, Mr. Wellington never got to see that because he was dead already.
These were the same messages that.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And so let's talk about that. Somebody or some group of people had access to both Nancy's cell phone and Chris's phone, at least a couple of people, I think. Again, I can't prove it, but you got to think there were simultaneous messages delivered to at least 4 phones, verified 4 phones, and that's not speculation, that's fact, from a phone number where the guy was clearly dead and could not text it himself, clearly. So that's one thing that just I can't wrap my head around.
Well,
And
here's
Mike Murphy, what do you think? Can you make some sense of this for me, Mike?
Well, the Benoit's partner, was he murdered? Some say he was murdered. Is it a coincidence that they both died on the same day? I think that's exactly what it was. I think it was a coincidence. Not only that, could the mob have done it or all? First off, Benoit's partner was shot. Benoit hung himself. Where if it was mob involved, first off, we know the mob has a proclivity for 22s, double tap back of the head.
Yeah.
They don't.
Mike Kelleher, do some research for me. Chris Benoit's text messages.
Okay, Angel, could I cut you off for a minute?
Please.
Okay, well, I want to blow one theory out of the water right now because Biff Wellington died of a heart attack. He did not get shot.
Okay, well, according to Yahoo News, he was shot.
Yeah, I'm reading up right now on Calgary Stampede Wrestling. He was found in his apartment after his parents were unable to reach him for 7 days. He was face down in the apartment, later to have discovered he had a heart attack. Another gentleman who was probably built to be 180, 190 pounds, who probably died at 225.
That's why I'm saying. That's why I'm saying his death was coincidence.
Well, we have 2 conflicting stories, both from credible news sources that say 2 different things. So,
and his Wiki page also said that he passed from a heart attack. Also, it says.
Okay. Go ahead, Mike.
44 years old.
Yeah.
I just no. I think it was a total coincidence that they just happened to die on the same day.
Mike Kelleher, what do you got?
So it says there was on early Sunday morning between 3:51 and 3:58 a.m. Benoit sent 5 text messages to coworkers. Do you want me to read them?
Yes.
Okay. So the first message went to 2 coworkers, sent June 24th at 3:53 a.m. And it said, Chris Benoit's cell phone. My physical address is 130 Green Meadow Lane, Fayetteville, Georgia, 30215. That was the first message. Message 2 was to 2 coworkers, says 3:53 a.m. Chris Benoit's cell phone. The dogs are in the enclosed pool area. Garage side door is open. All right. Number 3 to 2 coworkers, sent on the 24th at 3:54 a.m. a minute later. Nancy Benoit's cell phone was the one used, and it says, my physical address is 130 Green Meadow Lane, Fayetteville, Georgia, 30215. Okay. And then the 4th one sent it a minute later at 3:55 from Nancy Benoit's cell phone. My physical address is 130 Green Meadow Lane, Fayetteville, Georgia, 30215. All right. And then number 5 is to one person, and that's 3 minutes after the last message. So it went from 3:55 to 3:58. And it says, my address is 130 Green Meadow Lane, Fayetteville, Georgia, 30215. And
Now, I'm glad you did that because I want to stop you there. We know factually that the last message received was to Chavo Guerrero.
okay.
We know that. Why then, my question, why would he need to be texted their address when he clearly knew where they lived and had been at the house many times? Nobody has an answer for that.
I mean, was there documentation that he had been to the house many times?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact,
It was kind of a community where a lot of wrestlers lived also. Within a 5 minutes
True.
of that, there was 10 guys who all lived in the same area.
Oh, wow.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, Ricky's absolutely right.
Blanco lived there. Johnny Grunge lived there. DDP lived in the area. Well, had a home.
Well, let's talk about Johnny. Yeah, let's talk about Johnny Grunge because you and I both knew Johnny and Ted Petty. We knew them well. You knew Johnny better than I knew Ted probably a little better and longer than you. But that being said, there was a friendship between Johnny and Chris that a lot of people weren't even aware of until after he passed.
Well, that came from woman. He was very close with Nancy. They were very, very close from their ECW days.
And my understanding is that
loved. I'm just saying, she was so well loved. I mean, I brought this up to you last night. You said don't discuss it until tonight. Look at the shoot interview with New Jack, Honky Tonk Man, and Iron Sheik, where New Jack just breaks down and goes absolutely insane about Nancy and what a great woman she was, and that was his friend. Fuck Chris, and what Chris did was, you see a side of New Jack you don't normally see. So when somebody's that emotional, and I brought New Jack up earlier, this guy don't give a fuck. He stabbed people in the ring. He'll cut your head off. He don't care. And he's breaking down, crying over what a classy person this woman Nancy was, and how great of an individual.
I'm going to break the New Jack myth, okay? And I'm going to do something. I've said this on the show before, but I never elaborated. New Jack stayed at my house for 2 days, okay? He spent time with my wife and my daughter and myself for 2 days. I saw a side of Jerome Young that few people get to see because he's I'm going to dispel it, so get ready. He's a nice guy, okay? New Jack's a nice guy. He don't want you to think he's a nice guy. He doesn't want you to acknowledge him as a nice guy because, as Ricky said, New Jack is a lot like Ric Flair. He's Ric Flair 24/7, and New Jack is New Jack 24/7. That's him. And Ricky, tell me if I'm BSing.
I think the world. I love New Jack, man. The last time I saw New Jack, here's a funny story. This was about 6 years ago. I got a phone call out of nowhere in the middle of the day and said, "Are you anywhere near Brooklyn?" And I said, "I'm about an hour away." And he said, "Could you let me borrow a professional wrestling belt, a toy, anything you have?" He coaches youth football. And they were playing for the championship the next day, and he wanted to present the kids with a championship belt when they won. And I said, Jack, the only reason you're getting me to drive to Brooklyn is because of the fact it's for kids. And I drove out and met him in the middle of nowhere, Brooklyn, and dropped off a belt. And like you just said, there's a character of New Jack. Is he crazy? Yes. Is he tough? Yes. Would you want to piss him off? Probably not. But there's also a side of him that's a pretty cool guy and a pretty nice human being.
Yeah, well, I got to see the soft side. I actually did a reading for New Jack, and I kind of blew his mind. And as well as it went, and as much as he wept, that reading got me heat with him, and he hasn't talked to me since because I tapped into the real Jerome. And let's be real clear: New Jack and Jerome are two different people, Ricky, and you know that.
Yep.
And he don't like Jerome, but he loves New Jack. That's true. I mean, it's just that's Look, there are some guys that are like, look, the Ultimate Warrior went to such a level to change his name to Warrior.
Well,
Okay.
I thought part of that also was like trademark reasons too.
No. He was fucking nuts in the head.
Well, I know that, but I figured I always thought it was something like if it was his real name that Vince couldn't like own it.
He changed.
No, he owned the persona. Fucking nuts. He would talk about himself in third party, and he referred to himself as the Warrior.
Oh yeah.
You know, and
that's true.
He was a weird one to be around.
That's a guy
He's probably the most disliked guy in the history of professional wrestling.
Yeah,
and that we're getting way off course here, but now that he's passed away, he's become a fucking hero to everybody. You got the Warrior Award, and you got his wife presenting shit. Meanwhile, he hated his guts for fucking years.
Ricky, stop there for a second, because, brother, you just touched on something that's a real point of contention with me. A real point of contention. You just said it. He passed away, and now he's a beloved figure. With all the shit he did to Vince personally and that company as a corporation, and the money he cost them. But Chris Benoit, because of his circumstances, and again, there's no proof that he did this, but there's no proof against it. It's still an open cold case. I want to be real clear about that. The Chris Benoit case has not been closed. It's still open, which tells me even the police have doubt. Now, that being said, the WWE, WWF, Ricky, over the years have had this policy of forgiveness, letting people back. They leave for 10 years, 15 years, they come back, they're welcome home, welcome back home. Everyone,
because we're going to make a DVD off of you.
Everyone except Chris Benoit, who has been eviscerated from history.
Not true. Not true. There is another human being who they still make T-shirts and they make dolls of, but they never mention him, and that's Randy Savage.
Ah, okay. Randy. And by all accounts...
That's a whole other show. That's a whole other show that you can do, and we have to get off the subject, but that's another conspiracy theory.
Well, we're going to talk about that during that show, because I've actually been in touch with someone last night who knows Lanny Poffo very, 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 very well. And we may have Lanny on the show in about 2 weeks. Fingers crossed. Now, we've explored a lot of theories, a lot of conjecture. We've voiced a lot of opinions. We've named names. Of course, we can't prove any of it. And I want to make sure people understand this. These were opinions, conjecture, speculation, educated speculation nonetheless, but speculation. My question, I'm going to go around the table with this, and then we'll wrap it up. Starting with Mike Kelleher. How do you want to how would you like history? Let me ask you this way, and I'll ask you all the same question. How would you like history to remember Chris Benoit and Nancy?
Really, there's only a very small number, whether it's one person, two people, three people, who know what really happened. And I think at most there's probably one of those people still alive today. So we may never know the real, honest to goodness truth. And who am I to judge and to say, that he did this, he did that, whatever. I want to remember Chris Benoit as the talented performer that he was. I want to remember Nancy as the talented personality and performer she was, and just leave it at that.
Mike Murphy, how do you want history to remember Benoit and Nancy?
I would like Nancy and Chris to be remembered as their characters. Woman, the rabid Wolverine. Because like I said, I'm one of those people that what a person does behind closed doors is none of my business. I think the whole Chris Benoit murder subject is, let's face it, it's a question wrapped around an enigma, wrapped up in a riddle. Nobody's ever really going to know what happened or what actually happened. And I think it's until one person that does know something, I think there is somebody out there that does know, till that person decides to come forward, it's going to stay a cold case.
Yeah.
But I also think that Chris should be remembered for the work he did in the WWE/WWF. Because if you look at the Hall of Fame, look at some of the people we have in the Hall of Fame there. You got a convicted rapist. We've got a chick who did porn movies. Stuff like, come on. You know, they're allowed in, but what happened here? No.
Well, let us also remember that there's at least one alleged murderer in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Angela, that.
Jimmy Snuka.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
Yes.
And I knew Jimmy. I knew him well. And Ricky knew Jimmy well.
I knew him well too, also.
Yeah.
Jimmy was a very close personal friend.
Yeah. But, and Ricky and I both, in fact, speaking of Lanny Poffo, look who's calling. Wow. How about that? Okay, I'll have to get that message later. But now, Ricky, what do you think, kid? How will history? How do you want history to remember Chris and Nancy?
I'm going to give you my wrap-up speech here. All in one, real quick. I want to say thank you to everybody for having me on right now. This was a thrill for me. Excellent show. I loved it, and I can't wait to be back. And I also want to say, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I have no respect for a man that puts his hands on a woman. In the least case scenario, he was a wife beater and a spousal abuser on multiple occasions. He lost his first marriage to it, and it looks like he killed his wife to it, okay? It's a very sacred thing to me. I don't stand for it. I've done a lot of work with women's charities and stuff like that over the years. I'm still involved down here in Nashville, Tennessee, with a charity that homes women, rehouses women that are in domestic disputes and abusive relationships.
Right.
I want to see, and I hope maybe we could start a little something online, guys. I'd like to see women inducted into the WWF Hall of Fame, WWE Hall of Fame, as a pioneer and as one of the greatest talents in women's wrestling history. As a manager, as a character, and as a person, she deserves to be in the Hall of Fame for what she's done. As far as Chris, Charles Manson made good music with the Beach Boys, but we don't talk about him as a musician. He's a murderer. He should be remembered as a murderer, and he doesn't belong in front of kids. I don't want to see him on the WWE network. If that's the one thing they do to help alleviate the bullshit that happened in this world, and that's a child being murdered and a mother being murdered, he doesn't belong, and that's just my opinion.
All right. I appreciate it. And by the way, Ricky O will be joining us quite regularly. The next time I see you, Ricky, it will be on Thursday, April the 9th, and you and I will speak to our friend Jason Knight.
Oh, awesome. Can't wait for that one.
Yeah, I know you know Jason. And we have...
Ask Jason's opinion, Chris. They shared a locker room.
Yeah. And Jason Knight on April the 9th, and the next night, you, myself, and Mike Murphy, we're going to speak to our friend, the Metal Maniac, Jeff Miller.
Metal Maniac, brother.
Yeah. The next time Mike Kelleher and I get together, you and I will be speaking to Mrs. Wahoo McDaniel, Karen McDaniel, on April 14th.
Well, now wait a minute. You're forgetting that this Thursday we're recording the Refs Roundtable.
Oh, yeah. Tell everybody about the Roundtable. What you got? Oh, by the way, a brand new episode of the Roundtable went up today, as a matter of fact. Tell everybody about that episode and get them to watch it, and tell everybody what you got coming up. Because I don't even know. And I own the network.
You're a busy guy.
I am. I got a lot on my plate.
Well, this most recent episode of the Refs Roundtable, I brought in a guy I've known for almost 20 years. His name is Chris Keith, and he owns a promotion here in the greater Richmond, Virginia area called UEW, United Elite Wrestling. And so we had him on, and we were just talking about we basically talk about the news in the wrestling world for the past week. We go over Raw, SmackDown, AEW, and then we talk about the indies and stuff like that. So that's what the conversation was about. And coming up this Thursday, tomorrow, we're going to be 2 days from now, we're going to be recording an episode which I call the Road to Refomania in honor of Jeff the Ref.
Yeah.
So we are going to have our pick'em episode. We're going to go through the entire WrestleMania card and make our picks.
Well, I would like, if you would oblige me, I would like you to do something for me.
Sure.
Would you include Ricky O in that pick'em episode? Ricky, would you be up for it?
I'll do any episode. I love this stuff.
Okay, now Mike, I want you to tell Ricky what pick'em is.
Yeah, so basically, I'll send out the card, the complete card that is as of, I'll send it out probably Thursday morning. And you have to write down your picks for the matches and be able to talk about why you picked that person to win or team to win the match. And then there's no changing, there's no nothing. It's whatever's on your paper is what you're – and what I do is just use Post-it notes. And every match, I'll just hold up my Post-it note. So that way it's out there for everybody. But this is in honor of Jeff the Ref. We did this for one of the NXT pay-per-views. And that was the only one we actually got to do this for. But
Jeff only got to do one episode, and he passed away 2 days later.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, that was rough.
I'll be honored to be part of it.
All right.
Yeah, and I want to say, I wasn't going to say this publicly, but I want to say it because you guys are my friends and people who watch this, they're my family. And Ricky O and I haven't seen each other in a very long time. The last time I saw Ricky, he was in my home in New Jersey, and he had both the ECW World Heavyweight strap with him, the real one.
Wow.
And he had Taz's FTW belt with him. And remember that, Ricky?
Yeah, I remember coming to your home, man. It was great. I remember that.
Yeah. And that's the last time we saw each other. And just by chance or circumstances or by divine intervention, I was looking for somebody with the same kind of knowledge that Jeff the Ref had. And Mikey Kelleher, you know that to be true. And lo and behold, I see Ricky O commented on a post that I wrote. And I thought to myself, this is a gift from heaven. So I said, Ricky, funny thing happened, brother. And here he is. So I want everybody to know that.
Hey, Angel, it was always fun, and I hope one day we could do a show just devoted to the tri-state area wrestling and the personalities that came out of that era.
Oh my God, yeah.
And the Frank Goodmans and the Joe Panzerinos, Fat Frank, God rest his soul. So many good people and so many scumbags. And I think we can have one heck of a show just talking about our friends.
Yeah, our friend Gino Moore, Dino Santa, Dennis Carluzzo,
Billy Firemark,
rest in peace, And And I don't wish ill on anyone. I really don't. And I hope God has taken care of Gino and Dennis, and I hope they hugged and made up by now.
Yeah.
But I got to tell everybody that, things happen for a reason. And, and Jeff went home to be with God, and Ricky is here. And thank you, Lord, for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I want everybody to know that, speaking of Jeff and his family, we're giving a portion of the proceeds of every sale of Wrestling with the Future t-shirts to Jeff's mom. She had a little bit of a financial hardship, losing her son. And so I want to encourage everybody. In fact, Ricky, I sent you the link and a picture of the shirt and my daughter. They're both gorgeous. The shirt and my daughter. And Mike, shut up. Yeah, both mics. But I want to encourage everybody to purchase a Wrestling with the Future t-shirt because it will go to help Brenda Robinson, Jeff's mom. And
Mama Ref.
And she's a very spirit-filled, God-fearing woman who's this woman has got the faith of the Rock of Gibraltar. She's amazing, this woman. And tell everybody, we have a Twitter. We are at Wrestling Future on Twitter, Facebook.com/Wrestling with the Future. We are on literally, and I mean literally, every podcast platform across the country, and soon to be on Twitch TV. We are already on Daily Motion and YouTube, but you can find just about all of our videos on Facebook as well. You go to Wrestling with the Future on Facebook. Our videos are uploaded as soon as they're recorded and edited, by the way. So, and please send us comments and suggestions at wrestlingwiththefuture@gmail.com. I answer everything that comes in, and I got a bunch of stuff that's come in. And just some of the guests coming up. You heard me mention a few, and I'll tell you a few more. We've got J.J. Dillon, Davey O'Hannon, Sal Carenti, Jason Knight, the Metal Maniac Jeff Miller, Nikita Brezhnikov, Karen McDaniel, Tony Villano, the president of the International Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. J.J. Maguire, the WWE Music Man, is coming back. On May the 5th, we've got the one and only Magnum TA joining the show. We will have a special roundtable on May the 7th, Thursday night. We've got Flying Brian Pillman Jr. on May 12th. We have got the Monster Factory, Danny Cage. Doc Hyman will be back on May 19th, God willing, and Doc can figure out how to work his camera. And we've got Flying Brian Jr. back on May the 26th. And it looks like we lost Ricky.
I think he's there, but he just turned his camera off.
Oh, okay. So, with that being said, yes, Mike.
Also, one thing I want to bring up, Angelo, for the Wrestling with the Future fans, and not to selfishly promote, but part 2 of the Armageddon in-depth interview will be coming soon.
Yes. Yep. We got part 1 out, and then we got so jammed up with like Jimmy Valiant and Jack Victory and oh my God, and Pete Sanchez and Manny Soto and oh my God, the who's who of the old WWF.
Yes.
On behalf of Mike Kelleher, oh, by the way, let's plug your television show, Legacy List with Matt Paxson, featuring Mike Kelleher, the stuff guy. Mike Armageddon Murphy can be seen on YouTube. Just type in Armageddon Mike Murphy. Ricky O can be found at his social media. Ricky, tell everybody where they can reach you.
Very easy. Twitter is Ricky Otazu, RickYOtazu. That's my name on Facebook, on Twitter. Reach out to me. Let's be friends.
All right, friends. Till next time, Psychic Medium Angelo. Goodbye, everybody. Happy wrestling. We'll see you next time.